Alright, so as we open up with IB, Achilles is at mess in his hut. So the thing about, but feels obliged out of consideration for his men to make an appearance, it's almost as if Achilles is now embodying that symbolic figurehead that Priam was earlier in the text. What does yours say there?
Oh, nothing. She just highlighted it. I got this from another person.
Oh, right.
We haven't analysed this part yet.
Okay, so the key thing with the construction of this scene is the spatial distance between Achilles and the rest of his men. Okay, so the men are obviously all closely crowded shoulder to shoulder. They're sharing a table together, but it's really significant that Achilles sits apart at a little folding table of inlaid ivory that his attendants Automedon and his squire Alcimus, I'll say all the names wrong, have set in a secluded corner where the torchlight does not reach. Okay, so all of this is very significant because, one, you know, you've got the table being made out of ivory and whatever else, so all fancy stuff and everything, while all the other men are really crowded around this little trestle table. So his table is really fancy. The trestle table is kind of like, you know, it's something you'd string up if you run out of table space at a picnic. So with this, it's very different from the leadership that you would see with Mandela. Why?
Mandela seems like the type who, like, he would go to where the men are.
Exactly.
Or give them his ivory table.
Yes, exactly. So we've got a very different approach there. And also, he doesn't want to separate himself from the people. He wants to immerse himself amongst the people, understand the people as well. Of course, you know, you've got the symbolism of light and dark, and the fact that the light is not reaching Achilles suggests he's shrouded in darkness. This is a very dark time for him. But the fact that he makes an appearance means that he's sort of just doing the minimum with regards to his leadership duties. So under the low thatched roof, the air is thick with the smell of pitch from pinewood torches that sputter and pour out smoke and acrid fumes, and of animal fat and the sweat of unwashed bodies. The men are noisy. The noise they make gathers to an uproar, then lapses, then rises again, wave on wave like the sea. Cups are banged down hard in drunken fists. So, obviously, it's a very stinky place. It's in dire contrast to Priam's palace, of course. We often talk about how Achilles and Priam are very separated with regards to their spatiality. Achilles, or the whole text as a whole, can often be said to mirror the life cycle of man. How so?
Well, Priam is like in his old age, so he's already got his success and everything. And Achilles is a warrior, so he's a young man.
Yeah, he's more like the angsty teen kind of thing, you know, and you also have, you know, he's in this kind of barren, dry area. Priam's in a very, you know, polished, kind of established area. And then what's in between them is that really earthy, down-to-earth, natural ground that Somax helps Priam to get acquainted with, so that Priam understands what it is to be an ordinary man, because that's the thing that connects them to, the natural aspect of just what it is at base level to be a man. Now, so it's very stinky, but not only that, the way that they describe the noise, like waves, like the sea, that is just the beginning of the water imagery in this particular encounter. Because essentially what happens, and you know how questions asked you, you know, like, oh, Priam's successful because he tries something different, and we kind of say, well, actually he had help from, like, Somax and gods, and there was a lot, and Achilles actually had to be receptive as well. One of the reasons why he is receptive, apparently, is this kind of godlike presence here of his mother in this particular scene. And we know that his mother is, what is she again? She's like a, something to do with water.
Yeah, just something to, like an ocean or something.
Ocean something. She's an ocean lady. So let's have a look. Achilles' mother. Achilles' mother, Thetis. Peleus was the king of the Myrmidons, but who was the mother? Let's check. I used to know this. She is a sea nymph, a goddess of water. So basically, when she's around, she has a very fluid presence. So water imagery and such like can also be a very calming presence. So we get the hint, as you'll see unfold in this part of the chapter, that she has a presence here that's helping to calm him, soothe him, soften him, and prepare him for Priam's arrival. So just where, which is the god that helps Priam again? Hermes?
Hermes, yeah.
Yeah. Was there one other as well? There was one that gave the vision, and there was one that helped him across the.
There's a goddess of rainbow. Is her name Iris or something?
Yes, Iris as well. That's right. So, and now we have Thetis, Thetis, who's going to help things out as well. So, yeah, the noise they make gathers to an uproar, then lapses, then rises again, wave on wave like the sea. A quarrel breaks out, a shaggy head above a shaggy fur-clad shoulder looms in giant reflection against the flickering red of the deal plank wall. Others leap to join it, and for a time they surge in lumbering shadow play, from which sweaty faces, wet mouths, black eye pits flare, half drunk, half flame. Then the heave subsides, again like water, and the big shadows go back to being the solid body of men who slap one another on the back and shouting, crowd in close, shoulder to shoulder. In a quiet moment, someone begins a rambling reminiscence, some old sadness or talk of home, and is roughly silenced. More wine is carried in. So what we can see here is his men they're a little bit all over the place. Because why?
Well, they seem to be like happy at one point, but then just like sad at one point again. And happy again.
Yeah, well, basically, they don't have a lot of direction or leadership. So they're kind of stuck in a position of stasis. Let me see if I'm giving you the right word there. Stagnation can definitely work. What's stasis again? A period or state of inactivity. And that's because their leader is obsessed with dragging this body round and round and round all the time. So what do they have to do with each other? Fight, drink, banter, and then sometimes, they talk of home, and then they feel sad. Why can't they go home, and why are they kind of stuck?
Because of the ongoing war.
Yeah, and also the fact that nothing's actually really going on at the moment. They're neither finishing the war or even continuing the war. They're just kind of stuck. It's all stagnated. So these men have, I'd say, barely any idea of when they are going home, you know. It's like when you're stuck at a train station, you know. Now, the thing is, it then juxtaposes all this camaraderie and banter and everything with the sentence, Achilles barely notices all of this. It is just the noise that grown men make when they're in company and afraid of where silence might take them. Trees in a blow make such a din, so do stones when they clash together. So, this thing, is there any meaning when stones hit each other? Not so much. Stones are just like these sort of like concrete type things. They don't feel, they don't think. And again, trees blowing in the wind is a natural occurrence, something you don't generally question too much. So Achilles doesn't see any meaning in this social interaction going on. And he feels very, very disconnected from it, which is ironic considering that the thing that's really bothering him is the loss of basically his best friend. But without his best friend, all social interaction is meaningless. So it's pretty much the essence of life that we engage in banter with each other, discussions and bond with each other. You know, that's what we work all week to try and do, have the weekend off to see people. But now he's really in this mindset that life is meaningless, friendship is meaningless, everything's meaningless. So he sits with a full cup of wine before him, eating only so his attendants will be free to eat, because they can't eat unless he eats.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just like a courtesy type thing. So you have to wait until the master eats. So he does that just so that they're able to do so. So he's somewhat preserving or maintaining tradition, but without any deep sense of meaning or ritual or what it's worth. So now that Patroclus is gone, Automedon is his chief attendant, the driver of his chariot and his close body servant. One of the noblest of the Myrmidons, he is a lean-jawed fellow of an impressive lankness, with eyes deep set and reflective under thickest brows. What is happening around him seems never entirely within his grasp. He's a bit dumb. He is in consequence the most cautious, though, and reliable of men, doing all he does with a perfect consideration and punctilious rectitude. But Achilles is not quite easy with him. He admires the man, but is not drawn to him, as Patroclus was. So we can see, therefore, that Automedon was liked by Patroclus, and maybe why Achilles brings him around. But the thing with Automedon that's kind of helpful is he may not be the brightest, but he's predictable. Do you know what I mean? So he's not somebody who'd be likely to stab you in the back. hopefully not, but he's someone you can rely on, and that can be a good quality. But the thing is that Achilles resents Automedon because his presence reminds him of, what was going on with Patroclus. When the helmet was struck from Patroclus' head and he went reeling, hot blood gushing from his mouth, it was this man, Automedon, who ran to lift him up, and holding him close in his arms, watched the light that moved cloud-like across his gaze as the bright world dimmed, and crying out and leaning closer, caught the last breath at his lips. It was Automedon who stood astride the body and, blinded by tears, fought the Trojan jackals off. So why does he hate Automedon?
He's basically jealous.
He's jealous, why?
He was supposed to be the person who did that, but he
Exactly.
wasn't. He just watched.
Yeah, to defend Patroclus in his dying moments, and to be the one by his side. It's almost a romance or a bromance kind of story between Achilles and Patroclus. Achilles tells himself bitterly, not me, in his arms, not mine. It's because he resents Automedon that Achilles has actually made him his squire. So what's the saying, the cliche about enemies and friends?
Keep your enemies closer.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah.
Now, thinking of all these people, squires and those who are assistants, and, keep your friends close but your enemies closer, how can this relate to Mandela's camp?
I can't remember too much things.
Okay, that's right. Time to rewatch the film. But we could relate it to Jason and the white security guards and things like that because, Jason's just like, what the heck? These are the people who tried to kill us. And what does Mandela want?
He wants reconciliation.
He wants reconciliation. I don't think Achilles wants reconciliation, but they both go about this by keeping their hashtag, inverted commas, enemies close to them. Yeah. So Jason resents the white security guards. Mandela wants them nice and close. He wants it obviously to do with more of an image thing, because he says that if he's going to lead this rainbow nation, they need to see him as being a representative of both black and white. Okay. With regards to Achilles, I think it's a love-hate thing. It's like Automedon is somebody who is very close to Patroclus, so keeping him nearby is almost like keeping maybe a bit of Patroclus, but he resents the fact that he was there in the dying moments. Patroclus, he knows, would expect nothing less of him, so it's like fulfilling Patroclus' final wish, just take care of Automedon. But the thought is there always, him, not me, and it rankles. Automedon, alert to every mood in Achilles, is aware of this. He recognises Achilles' grief. He too is grieving. He loves the man, and not only for Patroclus' sake, and he does not let the hurt he feels affect the attention he gives to even the smallest and most unspoken of Achilles' needs. Ever watchful when Achilles gives the sign at last, he nods to Alchemist, and they draw stools up to the table and join him. So it's kind of sad, really, there, because, this guy, Automedon, he's obviously such a good guy. Do you know what I mean? He would be there having your back at all times, to the death kind of thing. And Achilles is mean to him. Awkward. Anyway, these are young, these men. They're young, these men, and have hearty appetites. Forcing himself, Achilles takes something from each of the dishes they have set before him. Scallions, a handful of olives, bread, a little sour cheese. The wine they have mixed and poured he barely touches. Now, food itself plays an important literary function a lot of the time. What's a key food item that relates to Priam's journey?
I can't remember.
Was it griddle cakes or something, wasn't it?
Was it? Wasn't it Somax's granddaughter made it for him?
Yeah, well, either way, it was something that was a real cultural item, wasn't it? Everyone who was an ordinary person had tasted and loved griddle cakes. Priam had never eaten them before, so partaking in the griddle cakes is like partaking in the culture of the common man, hopefully they're called griddle cakes. I don't know, it was something similar. So food is always somewhat of a bonding thing, here Achilles is only eating so that the others are able to eat. It's more of a gesture. Automedon tries to make it obvious that they tries not to make it obvious that they've been holding back. But Alcimus, who is just a boy, does not. When Achilles has served himself, his big hands go quickly to the platter of roast meat, the bread in its woven basket, and his jaws work horribly over the goblets of fat. So we've got this other assistant here is quite interesting, which is Alcimus or Alchemist. Very young, doesn't buy into the rituals perhaps as much as what an older person is. So when we look at the scale from young to old, right, Achilles is obviously got more youth than Priam. Priam is so bound by social norms. Do you know what I mean? With regards to the life he lives. Achilles as well, he knows how things work. I eat, they eat, blah, blah, blah. And Automaton, who's I think a bit more mature in this situation, he tries not to show how starving they are when Achilles is eating. He tries to hold back a little bit. Whereas this other young fellow, Alcimus, is like, oh, I get to eat now. He's like just gobbles everything up. Do you know what I mean? And there's a purity in that, you know, there's a purity and honesty in this, in his youth. Achilles is fond of Alcimus. Why?
He doesn't really try to hide.
Yeah, and he's got that youthfulness around him. Probably reminds Achilles of a better time, you know, where all their lives and opportunity lay before them. Anyway, he feels sorry for this young fellow. He would rather, he knows, be with the others, banging his cup down on the trestle table and tearing at his food as he shouts to be heard above the crowd. It is this overabundance in him of an animal nature he has not yet learned to subdue that Achilles finds endearing in the youth, and which makes his lapses into hulking awkwardness so easy to forgive. He likes to have Alcimus by him for his own sake, but as a reminder too of what he himself was just a season ago. So, and that sort of brings together his longing, his mourning, and the fact that he wishes he could go back in time. Once again, he reaches into a dish so that his companions can seize the occasion and do likewise. He takes a skewer of meat, he turns it in his fingers and puts it back. Now, in the smoky darkness at the far end of the hut, a hand sweeps across sounding strings. Achilles raises his head. Now, this is the interesting part. Is the next part highlighted? The god moose? No. Oh, we got to highlight this stuff. A god moves invisible among them, and in the wake of his passing, the full-throated shouting of the Myrmidons is cut off. The silvery notes of the lyre touch and change the air. When the voices start up again, as they do so soon enough, they're not so loud that the music cannot be heard beneath them. It persists, and so for Achilles does the chord the music has struck in him. So it's interesting because it's like, I don't know whether the music here or the use of the lyre is actually literal or metaphorical, but all of a sudden we hear this kind of, mystical sort of music going on, whether it's actual or metaphorical, and there's a presence of a god that seems to be moving above them, around them, but invisible. And then he feels this suspension of his hard, manly qualities. He feels that, that really stubborn, manly, strong part of him is almost let go for a moment. And he experiences in him a melting of will, of self. So all of a sudden he's softening. He's getting all gooey under the palms of this presence. Under its aspect, things continue to be just themselves. But what is apprehensible to him now is a fluidity. Fluid again. Yes? Have you found that? Yeah. So a fluidity in them that other occasions is obscured. The particles of which they are composed within the solid forms tumble and swarm. So what tends to tumble? Waves, yeah, or leaves in the wind, either one. But he describes it as if flow, not fixity, were their nature. The world swims, and for as long as the mood lasts, he too is afloat. Water, 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 water. Yeah? So then it becomes obvious. It says, he has moved into his mother's element and is open again to her shimmering influence. In such moods, he sees things. A thickening of the half-light beyond Automaton's shoulder that strikes him first as a startling of his blood. A figure as yet all hovering vagueness has begun to take shape there. Patrocles, he breathes. You, at last, he watches spell-struck as the figure advances through the smoky dark towards him. But this is no young man. His disappointment dissolves. What do you need to dissolve something? What do you need to dissolve something?
Water.
Water! In another deeper sorrow. What can be deep?
Ocean.
Yep. So we've got all this water imagery. And this is before Priam has arrived. Okay, so before he arrives, there's this mystical lyre music and the subsiding, shadow waves of the men has been replaced by all this other water imagery, this sense of fluidity, this sense of flow. And all of a sudden his stubborn will is dissolved, it sort of melts away. Anyway, so he thinks he sees Patroclus. But it's no young man, and he's disappointed. A figure, tall, spare, wearing a white robe without decoration. Obviously, the fact that they've mentioned that here is important because Priam went to great lengths to be like, no, I want to dress really plainly. Yeah. The loose flesh under his chin hangs in wrinkled folds, his eyes deep set under knotty brows. Wasn't Automedon's eyes also deep set under knotty brows? Bushy brows, I think it was for him. Okay, father, it is half a question this time. What does it mean it's half a question this time?
He knows that it's not his father, maybe?
Yeah, or maybe he thinks it is. It can be either way. I think he does think it is, though, in this case. But anyway, he rises from his seat. Alchemist, whatever it is, glances at Automedon, like, what the heck's up with him? Then back across his shoulder to see what is there. He sees, and he and Automedon start up both and reach for their swords. Achilles, half risen, continues to stare. It is 9 years since Achilles last saw his father. When he sailed from I don't know what to pronounce that. He was a little more than a boy, already fully grown and well made. But with a few signs upon him of the man, he has become a warrior, deep-chested, thick in his shoulders and neck, his features roughened by long months of bivouacking on the open plain, which is when you get kind of just a single sheet to protect you from the elements. It's kind of like a tent. It is what time has done to him. And it strikes him now in a great wave of sadness how much his father, too, is changed. He looks so old and shriveled now. The Peleus he left, who had clasped him so strongly to his breast, reluctant to the point of tears to let him go, had been in the prime of his life, strong, thewed, and warrior-like, a man to be feared. The figure who comes to him now is still noble-looking and tall, but all his muscles are slack. So, why? Why are his muscles slack?
Just because he's old.
Yeah, but also I don't think Priam's done much muscular, manly stuff in his life. He hasn't had to, has he, since he was a child slave.
Yeah.
So when you're a king, everyone does everything for you. Therefore, you're going to end up not having very strong biceps, you know what I mean? Yeah. The hair, once thick and iron grey, is thin and of a fleecy whiteness. Father, he says again, aloud this time, overcome with tenderness for this old man and his trembling frailty. Peleus, father! The great Achilles, eyes aswarm, is weeping. Obviously really significant, yeah? But also, it continues on from that flow of water. So we had all the watery, fluidy stuff going on around the place, and now the water is coming out of his eyes. And with a cry, he falls on one knee and leans out to clasp his father's robe. Automedon and Alchemist, their swords now drawn and gleaming, leap to his side. Sir! Achilles' startled looks again. The man is a stranger. Noble, yes, even in his plain robe, but not at all like Peleus. What tricks the heart can play! The man is clearly not his father, but for 100 beats of his heart, his father had been truly present to him. And he continues now to feel tenderly vulnerable to all those emotions in him that belong to the sacred bond. Okay, so there's a few things going on here. First of all, something that people often don't address is the godlike presence beforehand. That softened Achilles before Priam arrived. So if people just talk about, this is Priam's doing, it's him looking like a father, blah, 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 Achilles had already somewhat changed his disposition even before he entered the tent. But certainly the fact that Priam looks like the father externally is helping, the fact that they're both old men. But when you try to dress differently, right, say you look like a normal, everyday man instead of a king, certain things can be dead giveaways that you're royalty. Dead giveaways that you're the enemy and you're royalty and you're not really just some average old man. So this is where we come back to Somax. Somax has done so much for helping Priam to fulfill this role. He's basically got him to experience all these things like you would to a newborn babe, but to an old man, so that he can truly embody the essence and the aura of an ordinary man. Without that, you'd just have a king in a normal man's clothing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So just think that all these things had to come together at this one point in time. Somax's help, the experience of the journey, the presence of the god, and Achilles' own past experiences and longing for, the paternal figure in his life. All those needed to align, all those planets, to make this happen. Okay, so what tricks the heart can play? Not his father, but he still feels tenderly vulnerable to those emotions, which is why, to the puzzlement of his two attendants, he does not immediately take the interloper by the throat. That would be his normal reaction. But inquires almost mildly, but who are you? How did you get into this hut? As if whoever he might be, there was something uncanny in this stranger's appearing so suddenly and unnoticed in a place thick with his followers. So that's very strange for Achilles, that this random old dude's just rocked up in a tent full of warriors and soldiers. It's pretty audacious, you know what I mean? The old man totters and looks as if he might fall. He glances apprehensively at the younger of the two men who face him with drawn swords. Alchemist, lying can barely restrain himself from the springing. So we can see with Alchemist, or Alchemist, whatever his name is, he's always related to animals. Yeah, before he was related to an animal with his eating, and now he's being related to a lion, and he's always go get him, whether it's food or whether it's attacking, So he's definitely indicative of this very, very young, ambitious fellow. Achilles, seeing what it is that has alarmed the man, makes a sign. And Alchemist, after a quick look to Automaton for confirmation, sheathes his sword. Now, it's interesting that he looks to Automaton, because it's they've had discussions behind the scenes that Achilles isn't too right in the head at the moment, so if he says to do something, run it by me, okay? So Priam steadies himself. The occasion has moved too quickly and in a way he wasn't prepared for. He's come here to kneel to Achilles. Instead, the great Achilles is kneeling to him. Still, the moment has arrived. He must go on. I am Priam, king of Troy, he says simply. I've come to you, Achilles, just as you see me, just as I am, to ask you man to man as a father for the body of my son, to ransom and bring him home. So, of course, this is the key quote here as well, man to man as a father. Okay, so that's the big trying something unconventional thing. Priam closes his eyes. Now he thinks, now they will strike. So he's actually expecting to kind of die in this moment. Oh. But that doesn't matter. Why?
Sorry?
Why doesn't that matter? That he might be dead at this point in time, because some people say that he's trying to get Hector back for the sake of Troy.
Well, I think he wants to reunite with Patroclus.
Patroclus. Oh no, this is Priam, who
Priam.
thinks that he thinks that Automaton and Alchemist are going to kill him, or Achilles. He thinks someone's going to kill him. He said his bit, and he's like, "Okay, I'm going to die now," with his eyes shut. Why does he expect that? Why does he expect that he might die, and maybe he seems sort of okay with that? He's not exactly...
Well, I think he still sees Achilles as that honourable hero.
Oh, yeah?
And he might still want revenge because he saw him desecrate his son's body.
Okay. For me, one thing I'd like you to think about is the fact that he really wanted to tell his own story and leave a legacy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. He's
done it. He's actually done it. He's taken this different guise as an ordinary man. He's travelled all the way to Achilles' camp, and he said what he always planned to say. I have come to you, Achilles, just as you see me. Just say I am to ask you man to man as a father for the body of my son, to ransom and bring him home. That's probably as far as he maybe planned, because he just wanted to be something other than this symbolic king. He wanted to be known for something. He probably had a sense, I don't know how strong his sense of success really was, but he just knew that this was something he had to do. But anyway, moving on. The two attendants continue to stand alert, Automaton still hand on sword. Achilles rises to his feet, but nothing happens. But how did you get here, he asks. Into the camp, into this hut. I was guided, Priam answers. And in recalling the god who has led him there, Hermes, the giant killer, he takes heart. Why does he take heart?
I don't really get what it means.
So it means he's given more confidence. So he acknowledges there that how he got there was he was actually guided, and it wasn't just by Hermes, it was also by Somax as well. But when he remembers that a giant killer, a massive god, helped him out, he's kind of like, oh yeah, that's right, Hermes supports me, maybe he's got my back. Do you know what I mean? Achilles, he sees, is impressed by this because he's got a giant killer on his side. Achilles has got like the goddess of water. But he doesn't repeat the word, but it is registered in the line that appears between his brows, the slight parting of lips. So it's like, oh. He understands immediately. Priam sees that more than ordinary forces brought him here. And that's, I think, a good quote to take as well. More than ordinary forces have brought him here to show that it's not just trying something unconventional and being the ordinary man that helped the success. Despite the vast bulk of the man, the span of the shoulders, the rope-like muscles of the neck, the warrior in him has, for the moment at least, been subdued. I came in a wagon, he explained, with my herald Idaeus. He is out there in the yard with the treasure I've brought you. He does not kneel. The occasion for that has passed. Too late. So the whole scene, as he imagined and acted it out in his mind, doesn't actually take place. Instead, he stands quietly in the stillness that surrounds them, despite the noise that Achilles' Myrmidons are making. They have no idea what's going on. And waits. Achilles narrows his eyes, examines the man before him. He makes a sign almost invisible to Automaton, who removes his hand from the weapon and goes out. So it's like, you can go check the wagon. Because it could be a Trojan horse type situation. What happened with the Trojan horse?
There were warriors stuck inside the Trojan horse, and then they just killed everyone.
Exactly. So who knows what's in this wagon? Or, it could be like a trick, yeah? All this has happened so quickly and so quietly in this darkened corner of the hut that the men at the big mess table remain unaware of the extraordinary happening in their midst. They continue to shout one another down in boisterous argument and raise their cups in drunken toasts. Under the din they make, the notes of the lyre continue to colour the air, all of which gives the moment as Achilles experiences it kind of like a dreamlike quality. So what they're basically describing as there is like the weird, like mystical music, as well as the fact that nobody else is really seeing what's going on, makes him feel like he's in a dream. It's all very surreal to him. The tenderness of his earlier mood, caused by his mother, is still strong upon him. Beyond this old man who claims, can it be true, to be Priam, king of Troy, hovers the figure of his father, which is too immediate in Achilles' mind, too disturbing to be pushed aside. So what he's feeling there is, despite the fact that this guy claims to be Priam, king of Troy, he's still really feeling this fatherly presence, and it's making him think of his own father. Impatient to know what it is exactly that he has to deal with, he makes a sign to Alcimus to go after Automaton and bring back news of what he's found. But Alcimus, reluctant to leave his master alone, hesitates, and before he can make the move, Automaton is back. He is bundling in a second old man, sturdier than the first, so even Somax has better biceps than Priam. Shock-headed and dressed in a garment of coarse homespun, he bears no resemblance at all to the Trojan herald whom Achilles has seen on at least 3 previous occasions at the camp. It's true, Automaton reports in a whisper. There is a wagon loaded with treasure. In fact, sir, and he lowers his voice even further, it's just an ordinary hay wain. This fellow is the driver of it. Rather odd, I'd say, and argumentative. He did not want to leave his mules. Because remember, Somax is a very loyal sort, and he loves his mules. You are Idaeus, the king's herald? Achilles asked the man. He's puzzled not simply by the claim that this rough-looking fellow should be Priam's herald, but by a situation that has already passed beyond anything he has a precedent for. What surprises him is how easy he feels, despite Automaton's warning. There's something about these guys that just give off a good feel to him, good vibes, But again, why else does he feel so easy and calm? Not angsty and frustrated like he normally is?
Oh, because of the god's presence.
That's right, his mother, calming him with her fluidy presence. Okay, the carter, who is rather alarmed, in fact, at being brought into the business and by the smoky darkness of the place and the noise, which is more like what you'd expect of a tavern than of a hero's camp, rubs his nose, a gesture that serves to settle him, and scratches his head. He's playing for time. Now that the question has been put so directly, and with Priam looking on, he does not see how he can answer. Well, old fellow, Achilles asks again, you are the famous Idaeus? Idaeus? He isn't, of course, he isn't. He's Somax, a simple workman who, this morning, as on every other morning of his life, just happened to be standing in the marketplace waiting to be hired when 2 strangers appeared who just happened to be the king's sons, Trojan princes. Now, Somax's feeling, I think, is sometimes a similar feeling to the members of the Springboks. What does he want with us? Why does he want us to do these things? We're rugby players. We need to be training because we keep losing and all we want to do is win. But they're thrown into the centre of this political journey. Anyway, so the 2 strangers, king's sons, they came and found him. One came to a halt with a nod in his direction, tugged lightly at the other's sleeve, instantly attracted, as people often were, to the little offside mule, his famous beauty, all of which, though true enough and relevant, at least to himself, does not even begin to account for the unlikeliness of all of this. So the mule is significant right throughout the whole text. The irony, of course, calling a killer beauty. You know what I mean? It's this whole thing of deceptive appearances and being more than what you are to the outside eye. It's also something of forgiveness, because there's this sort of beauty in the fact that despite the fact that this mule killed his son, so Max is able to see beyond that and forgive and treasure and be loyal to the mule. The words to cover it are there in his head but would get turned about and jumbled if he tried to get them out. And how can he explain with Priam there to hear that this king, who is in his care for all his grave authority, is as innocent of the world as a naked newborn babe and just as helpless? And that's, of course, really important, because even though Priam's a really old man, his experience and his exposure to the outside world is like that of a baby who needs to be guided. Similar to how in Invictus it's a kind of a newborn nation. A reborn nation, do you know what I mean? That needs direction, that needs symbolism, that needs all that sort of stuff. And anyway, based on timing, we're going to wrap that up there so we can set you some follow-up tasks.
Okay.